Good evening, everyone. I've been watching as you've been logging in and thrilled to see that so many of you could join us tonight. I'm Sam Porritt. I'm the founder of Falling Forward. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting previously, again, we're really happy that you could join us. I see on the list a number of longtime friends and also a number of new names, and we're really thrilled to have each of you with us. As the slide says, here we are again. And 1 year ago, like everybody, we pivoted due to COVID. Instead of being able to do face-to-face live events, we pivoted and did this Zoom event for the first time. And this year we thought perhaps we would go back to live events and maybe not do a Zoom event. Although I do have to share that several people reached out to me and said they enjoyed the Zoom event so much, they hoped we would continue doing it, even if we did go back to face-to-face events. So as the slide says, here we are again. In all seriousness, one of the things that we learned last year when we did this event was that one of the real advantages of doing a virtual event is we could be in touch with people all over the country, right? When we do a face-to-face event, it may just be in Lawrence or maybe only in Kansas City or only in one city, but through Zoom, we can reach people all over the country. And I showed this slide last year, and I'm going to show it again because this is something we are actually really proud of. Is Falling Forward is thought of as a Midwest organization. We fund rehab at 4 rehab centers where the white stars are on the map. Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois. We have lots of friends in those 4 states. But as you can see, all the blue shaded states on the map are all places where we do have friends and donors, who support Falling Forward. So we're thrilled that we can do an event like this where we can reach everybody from coast to coast. And looking at the list of those of you who have logged in, there are people with us from all over the country. So welcome. We're thrilled to be able to touch base with all of you. So as you saw in the invitation, the purpose of this event is to celebrate. And one thing we want to be clear about right up front, we call this a friend raiser, not a fundraiser. For those of you who haven't been to one of our events before, tonight, there's not going to be any fundraising. There's no auction. There's no raise the paddle, none of that. This is an informative event. We want to make friends. We want to, spread the word about Falling Forward. And this is our chance to do it, to touch base with people who have been longtime supporters and to introduce ourselves to people who are new to Falling Forward. And many of you have been invited through perhaps one of our board members, right? One of our board members and they've invited you to attend tonight's event so you could hear what Falling Forward is all about. So that's what it is. Tonight is a friend raiser. And yes, as the title implies, it is a celebration. And the theme of the event, all through the event, is going to be celebrating because we believe there's a lot to celebrate. So quick overview. So yeah, I'm going to talk for a while. I'm going to go through a few upfront slides, talk about kind of an overview of the past year. Then the real meat of the evening is getting into several patient stories, people whose lives have been changed by rehab. And those of you on the phone, on Zoom tonight who are donors, your dollars made these stories possible. That's what this celebration is all about. And then, yeah, I'll come back and talk for a couple of minutes at the end and wrap things up. But pretty simple agenda for the evening. A couple of comments on logistics. I'm sure all of you have been on lots of Zoom events by now. All of you as participants are muted, so you don't need to worry about background noise or anything. You can ask questions at any time using the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. And there will also be a chance to ask a live question. So after you hear our patient stories, we will open up for Q&A. And if you'd like to ask your question live rather than typing it into the Q&A box, you can hit the button that says raise your hand, and I'll see that and I can open up your microphone, and only your microphone, you can ask your question. So that is the intro, that's our logistics, and now let's get underway. So for those of you who were with us on our event a year ago, we talked a lot about COVID. And candidly, we were uncertain what impact COVID was going to have on people needing rehab and the ability of rehab providers to provide rehab. But also very candidly, we were uncertain what impact COVID was going to have on our fundraising. And I'm sure you heard that was true of nonprofit organizations, across the country. That nonprofits in general were not certain what impact COVID may have on fundraising, in the economy, with people losing their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Would that have an impact on fundraising? So last year, right, we were pretty blunt in saying, hey, we're concerned about COVID. We think there's going to be a surge, more people needing rehab. Those of you who were on the call last year and heard that, you really stepped up, because here we are a year later, and we have some big things to celebrate. And so let me tell you what I mean by big things to celebrate. So the first one is, last year was our best fundraising year ever. Our best fundraising year ever by far. So we're proud of that, right? But you made that happen. The people who are listening tonight, who are donors, and those who aren't able to join us tonight, other donors, really stepped up and made it our best fundraising year ever. So that's about, that's what a nonprofit does, is raise money. But what does that mean? What it means is you help more people recover than ever before. Those of you who donated and stepped up and made it our biggest fundraising year, allowed us to then invest those dollars in more rehab for more people, meaning more people recovered. So for us, a huge year, much to celebrate. And here's the number, right? 25 people were funded last year. Again, for us, this is by far the most people that have ever been funded in one year. So 25 lives were changed by your generosity and your donations. So huge round of applause, much to celebrate. And yes, some of those 25 lives that were changed last year are the ones that you're going to hear about tonight. And here's a breakdown, if you will, the types of injuries and events that were covered for those 25 people. We did expect that there would be more post-COVID patients. And frankly, we were surprised that we only had 2. But as you can see, spinal cord injuries, stroke, and traumatic brain injuries, there were a lot of them. And if you followed us for several years, that's been true every year, right? Those are the big 3 that need the most rehab. Those folks, recovery is slow. They need a lot of rehab. They need a lot of rehab well past what insurance will cover. And that's where we step in and help them continue their recoveries. So as you can see, we helped a lot of people with spinal cord injury, stroke, and brain injuries last year. So with that kind of as background or an overview of the prior year, now we're going to get into the stories, right? We're done with the numbers. Now let's actually hear about some of the people that were helped by your generosity. So here's the first one. I'm going to introduce the first 2. So this is the first one, a lady named Janelle, who was a patient out at Craig Hospital in Denver. And those of you who are familiar with Craig, one of the very top rehab centers in the country. They very much specialize in brain injury and spinal cord injury. And here's Janelle's story. So Janelle, 39 years old, from Salida, Colorado. She had a severe stroke, major stroke, paralyzed the right side of her body and impacted her speech. She went to Craig for both inpatient and outpatient rehab. Where she ran into the wall with insurance was on the outpatient rehab. As you can see on the slide, her insurance would cover only 20 visits of outpatient rehab. That's a very, very restrictive insurance plan. 20 is the bare minimum. There aren't insurance plans that provide less than 20. She had, if you will, the worst insurance plan, only covering 20 visits. That's where we stepped in with your dollars that you've given us, and Falling Forward funded another 36 sessions for her. The difference in recovery for someone that has a stroke and only 20 sessions of outpatient rehab, and someone like Janelle who had 56 sessions of outpatient rehab, 20 versus 56 is virtually night and day. So here's what Janelle accomplished. Here's what Janelle is now able to do. She's now independent with all of what we call the activities of daily living, things like bathing and dressing, right? That many of us take for granted. She's able to cook, do laundry and other household chores. She's able to walk with a cane both around her house and out in public. And this one floored me when I first saw it. She's able to go biking and kayaking again. Now, both of those in an adaptive way. And here's some pictures that help bring this to life. So there's Janelle walking with her cane, right? You can tell if you really look at that picture of her walking, her right hand is still impaired, right? She still doesn't have much function in her right hand and arm, but she got function back in her right leg to the point that she's able to walk now and maintain balance, just with a cane. There she is at the top, doing recumbent biking, and then at the bottom doing kayaking. Imagine the thrill of being where she is today and the difference of where she is today, able to walk, bike, and kayak, versus where she was when the insurance company cut her off at 20 visits. Pretty remarkable. That's what rehab does. So Janelle could not be with us tonight in person, but she's super grateful, and she sent a video. So here's a very quick clip of Janelle, and I'm going to set it up and I'm going to preface it. You may want to turn up your speakers a little bit. Janelle still has speech impairment, right? She's done a lot of work on her speech. Her speech is still impaired. She doesn't have the ability to get much sound, right? Vocal cord sound. So her voice is more of a whisper, but you're going to hear it. So this is Janelle. She wanted to send a message to all of you of her appreciation. So again, I think pretty remarkable, right? Major stroke, but in the world of people who have major strokes, Janelle is an exception, right? She's walking, she's biking, she's kayaking, and her recovery continues, thanks to all of you. So that's Janelle's story, our first one. Our second story is somebody that if you followed Falling Forward, and even if you were on our event a year ago, you'll recognize this guy named Jackson. In fact, a year ago, on this very call, a year ago, Jackson and his parents joined us live and gave us an update. And you're going to hear an update from them tonight, but not live. So, for those of you who don't know, Jackson is our youngest patient ever. And we think this is kind of fun. He was our 100th patient ever. Jackson came to us when he was barely 2 years old. He was unable to speak from birth. His diagnosis is something called childhood apraxia of speech. And he needed a lot of speech therapy. I should have mentioned it on the prior slide, but you probably saw the sign. Jackson went to the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in Chicago. It formerly was called the Rehab Institute of Chicago. And for those of you who are, kind of rehab people, you'll be familiar with Rehab Institute of Chicago and Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. It is the #1 rehab center in the United States, if not the world. They are truly the place to go for rehab. They set the standard, and Jackson, this 2-year-old boy who was unable to speak, has the good fortune of living an hour away from the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab and got admitted into their program. So he had the very, very, very best speech therapists and the best chance for a recovery. So Jackson is now almost 4 years old. And this summer we got to Chicago and we filmed a video with Jackson's parents and his speech therapist, Ashley, and they're going to take it away. And I'm going to play the video. It runs for about 4 minutes, and you're going to hear Jackson's story from his parents and from his speech therapist.
Quick story about Jackson from birth. Premature, 3-pound, 3-ouncer, really tiny kid. Really, to be honest with you, didn't know whether he's going to make it home.
We didn't pick up on that he wasn't making sounds or cooing or any kind of, he'd cry, but he wouldn't make any other sounds. And finally, we went for a developmental assessment at U of C, and they told us he probably needs speech therapy.
But once we got to Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, like I said, Ashley, the speech therapist, was all focused on his ability, the correct sounds. Based off that, that's how she set up the therapy.
Jackson really responded to intervention that was play-based and really interest-driven, which was what we do a ton of here at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. We really spent a lot of time incorporating movement in our therapy sessions and really following Jackson's lead in terms of the toys and therapy materials he was most engaged with.
Shirley Ryan guided us. You need to do this, this, this. We did it. So it was 2 days later. It was on a Saturday. And we were in the kitchen, and I was holding him, and I don't know if we just finished breakfast and got him out of his high chair, and I'm holding him, and he said, "Mama." And we all just sort of, our heads snapped and looked at him and said, "What?" And he pointed to me again and said, "Mama." And of course, tears just started streaming down my face.
The big breakthrough moments with him and with Ashley is, he was picked up another word or another motion of his mouth or something of that sort where he can say a word like up.
I want you to pick me up. That was huge.
We came to a point where our insurance ran out of therapy sessions. The next day they called and told us that we were receiving this grant from Falling Forward Foundation, and we were just over the moon. I mean, it gives me chills just thinking about it. What a blessing. What a huge, huge blessing to our family to be able to continue that phenomenal speech therapy that we were receiving from such a top world-renowned place. And it was truly making a difference, and we didn't want to stop. We wanted it to keep going.
We really started doing more intensive therapy with Jackson at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in September of 2020. And at that point, we were seeing him 2 times a week for 3 months. We would not have been able to do that through his regular insurance plan.
He's come a long way from saying absolutely nothing to now speaking in sentences with 8 or 10 words and asking questions, be able to say, "Hi, I'm Jackson. What's your name?" Or "Can we be friends?" Or just to start teaching him how to interact with other kids.
At this point, Jackson has a pretty much age-appropriate vocabulary inventory. His ability to use words and combine words and sentences to communicate for a variety of different functions is at an age-appropriate level. I'm so grateful for the Falling Forward Foundation and Jackson's family and being able to have the opportunity to work with Jackson and watch his language skills come such a far way in a short matter of time. It really is truly impressive.
So now he's 3.5, and I think if you hadn't known him before, you wouldn't have known anything he had any delays. And so we are incredibly grateful for that opportunity to provide Jackson with that voice, to be able to function in society and function in his life.
Say bye, Meg.
Bye, Tim.
Say thank you.
Hasta.
So that's Jackson. So that was Jackson this summer, the video that we just showed you. The picture on the screen now is Jackson last week. So his parents, Thanksgiving night, forwarded a text message to me. The text message, was saying how one of the things they're so thankful for is the support from Falling Forward and what a difference it's made for Jackson. And the example, they sent 3 photos. This is one of the 3 photos of Jackson meeting Santa Claus last week. So something that, every parent, dreams of is taking their kids to meet Santa. And here's Jackson getting to meet Santa and talk with Santa and answer Santa's questions about what gifts he's wanting for Christmas. Something he couldn't do until this year. So think about, Jackson had about 2 years of speech therapy. And as his therapist, Ashley, said on the video, with that, brought him up to an age appropriate level, right? That he caught up. His mom said at the time of the video, he was 3.5. And she said, if you didn't know him before, you might not realize that he ever had, a speech difficulty. He's caught up. And how significant that is for the rest of his life, right? He's now almost 4 years old. He's in preschool. He's interacting with kids in his preschool and has a full, probably normal, quote unquote, normal life ahead because he got his speech skills back. So this is one of the stories I think we are most proud of, because here's this young boy who the rest of his life, is going to be, again, quote unquote, normal because of the rehab provided by our donors and Falling Forward. So that's Jackson. So these 2 stories, Janelle and Jackson, I've been the one to tee these up for you. I want to pause here and see if anybody has any questions. I don't see any in the Q&A box, but anybody have any questions? Anyone want to raise their hand and ask a live question? We're going to take a little pause here for questions. And I do see one hand up. Kathy's hand is up, and let's see. I'm going to unmute her. Or I guess you have to unmute yourself. Kathy, are you there?
It was a mistake from earlier.
So I don't.
Okay. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Kathy.
Sorry.
If you or anybody else does have a question, we now know the raise your hand function does work. So anybody, any questions on either Janelle's case or Jackson's story? Stan's question that he types in says, please remind us how people are selected to participate in Falling Forward. Great question, Stan, and I'm glad you raised it, particularly for people who are new. That's a really important question. We leave the choice in the hands of the therapists at the 4 rehab centers that we work with. So we provide the funding, essentially a budget to them, and then we leave the patient choice to the therapists. We do that for a couple reasons. One, it's very much a medical decision, right? They are trained medical, they've gone through years and years of school to be therapists. They are medical experts and rehab experts, and it's very much a medical decision of who needs more rehab, versus someone who may not need more rehab. So we leave it to them. They're professionals at doing it. The other reason is they know those patients, right? They are working directly with those patients. We haven't met them. We're at a distance, we're at an arm's length. So we leave the decision to the therapists at the rehab centers. I will tell you, it's not an easy decision, right? We don't give them unlimited funds. In fact, we don't give them enough funds. They have to make hard choices between patient A, B, and C, which patient is going to get the funding. So yeah, Stan, thank you for asking that, because that is a really important piece of how Falling Forward works. And it's been that way from the beginning in 2013. And we think it works really well. We have a high degree of trust and faith in the therapists at each of the rehab centers that we work with, for making those decisions. Okay, so with that, I am going to move ahead because our next story is one I will just open it up, and then you're going to finally hear live from someone tonight. And the next story is a man named Doug. And Doug has been going through rehab at LMH Health in Lawrence, Kansas. Doug has we think, really unique story. And here's why. Doug's background, he is a lifelong physical therapist. He's a physical therapist who not once, but twice has become the patient himself. The first time he became the patient was back in 2015. As you can see on the slide, he had a car accident that resulted in a spinal cord injury. And I actually met Doug shortly after his injury when he was going through his rehab for the spinal cord injury. You might imagine someone who's a physical therapist by training has a lot of motivation, right, to do rehab. And Doug is that in spades. Doug worked tirelessly to recover from his spinal cord injury, and boy, did he recover. And I've got a photo I'm going to show to prove to you how Doug recovered from his spinal cord injury. This is almost 4 years later. Doug climbed a 14,000-foot peak in Colorado, and this is Doug summiting that 14er in Colorado. So he made this remarkable recovery from a spinal cord injury, and his proof to himself and to the world was climbing a 14er, which few people can do whether they've had a spinal cord injury or not. So it's remarkable after a spinal cord injury, right? Well, sadly, tragedy struck a second time. And the second time was Thanksgiving Day 2019. So 2 years ago, Doug had a major stroke. And that stroke paralyzed the right side of his body. And it also left him unable to speak. So I am thrilled now to introduce Doug and his amazing wife, Shirley, are going to join us and tell their incredible story. And they can go ahead and unmute and start their video, and we will hear their story.
Are we there?
Hello, Shirley and Doug.
Hi,
Aye.
can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to have you
Okay.
join us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, yes.
We're delighted to be with all of you this evening. Yes, Doug's most recent story began on Thanksgiving Day 2 years ago. Actually, probably the week before, Doug started having some very odd symptoms in his neck. And so he was in and out of KU Med Center and diagnosed with dissected carotid artery. A treatment plan was put in place, and we thought that he would be back to normal. The artery was going to heal, and he'd be back to normal within about 2 months, and life would go on. But that didn't happen. Instead, he was discharged home on Thanksgiving Day around noon, and then had a massive stroke that evening. Doug then spent 2 weeks at the hospital, and then another 10 weeks in inpatient rehab. Upon discharge from inpatient rehab, Doug then started having outpatient rehab at Lawrence Memorial Hospital. And that's where he's been going every week since February 14th, Valentine's Day of 2020. At first, it was 3 times a week for PT, OT, and speech, and now it's 2 times a week for PT, OT, and speech. When he started at LMH, he was able to walk about 200 feet with a Hemi walker, and with the therapist holding on to his gait belt at all times. Speech-wise, he was working on identifying objects. And so the speech therapist would lay out 3 objects. Maybe it would be a screwdriver, a flashlight, and a pencil. And she would say, Doug, pick out the flashlight. And he would have to pick out the flashlight. Doug also had not just aphasia, but apraxia. And so another thing the speech therapist was working on him was finding things in space, finding his ear. So she would say, Doug, point to your ear, and he would hunt all over his head to find his ear, or find his nose, and he would be looking around to find his nose. So that's kind of where Doug was when he started at LMH. By July, I believe, of 2020, Doug started using a quad cane. So he graduated from the Hemi walker to the quad cane. And then in January of this year, the therapist started working with him with a single point cane. And that's what he's been using in therapy ever since, is the single point cane. Here at home, or when we go on walks, Doug still uses the quad cane, but in therapy, it's always a single point cane. And more recently, probably around the time that his insurance ran out, his therapist started working with him in the parallel bars without using any kind of assistive device. And now he is also working outside of the parallel bars, walking without an assistive device.
Yeah.
Doug, do you want to talk a little bit about walking that you're doing?
I walked 5/8 of a mile.
Where do you do that?
The pavilion. Yeah, this billion.
So Doug, he is very much motivated to work hard. And so on the days that he doesn't have formal therapy at LMH, we walk at the Lawrence Sports Pavilion, and they have a track that is a 1/8 mile circuit, and he is up to 6 laps on that track.
Yes.
And more recently, for many months, I would hold on to the gate belt. Now I trail behind him, a step behind. I'm not sure what to do with my left hand because it for months was holding on to that gate belt, and now I keep it at my side. It wants to drift up and grab that gate belt, but if it makes it to the gate belt, Doug tells me to let go.
Yeah.
He is on his own power at this point.
Yeah.
Which is a
around the
remarkable.
same time that
Sorry to interrupt you. I wanted
Yeah.
to kind of emphasize how remarkable that is, right? To walk independently,
Yeah.
no one holding on to you. Remarkable.
Yeah.
around the same time that insurance ran out, Doug was making great strides in speech therapy. His therapist at the hospital was starting to give him much more challenging things to work on, more complex things. He was looking at categories, subcategories, doing some adding and subtracting. And she started working with him on a new treatment called phonomotor treatment. I'm not sure if I even say that correctly, but what we learned is that phonology provides the fundamental building blocks for all language processes. And what that therapy looks like is Jenna shows Doug pictures of the way you form your mouth to make different consonant sounds and vowel sounds. And so Doug works on making those sounds. He has a mirror in front of him, as well as Jenna, who sits across the table from him. And he practices making these consonant sounds and vowel sounds. And then he starts connecting the sounds together to make oftentimes non-words, but sometimes also to make actual words. So that treatment then is to help with articulation and word retrieval, and just to help build new pathways in the brain so that communication will become easier, hopefully, as time goes by. What would you have to say about speech?
The speech is very hard. My speech therapist gives me homework exercises to do.
Some of the home exercises that Jenna sends home with Doug, I have trouble with. They are very challenging. Sometimes it's rhyming words, it's coming up with synonyms. Sometimes I cheat. I'm trying to coach Doug, and so I cheat and I look on my device to see what a synonym might be for a word, and then I start giving him clues if he's stuck. So sometimes it's a mutual process for both of us. Doug's arm and hand, the right arm and hand, that's been the slowest in terms of progress. But in the last few months, one of the exercises that Doug likes to do at home is he gets down on the floor and we do stretching exercises. And there's one where we stretch his arm, and he is starting to be able to move his arm in a prone position on his own. And so that's encouraging to us that we're seeing some movement there.
Yes.
Last spring, Doug's PT asked him to, yeah, did you have a question?
No,
Sarah?
go ahead.
Oh, okay. Last spring, Doug's PT asked him what some of his goals were, and he said that he wanted better balance. He wanted to be able to walk on uneven surfaces. He wanted to be able to walk faster and be more flexible. And then the other was to be able to ride a bike. Doug's sister and brother-in-law know how much Doug loves to ride bike, and so they gifted us with money to purchase an electric assist recumbent trike for Doug, and we actually picked it up yesterday. We ordered it back in June, and just because of how everything is everywhere, it took about 5 months for that to come in. But in the meantime, Jody, his therapist, has been working with him in trying to strengthen his leg. His knee wants to kind of fall in when he has it on a bike pedal, and so they've been trying to strengthen the knee and the hip muscles, and so those 5 months that we've been waiting have not been in vain. So we're excited about the bike. Prior to the stroke, Doug was riding probably 2,500 miles in a year, and we would go on bike trips, and sometimes self-supported, just with ourselves and a couple of friends, and sometimes with a group of people of maybe 200, 300 people. So we're looking forward to seeing what new adventures the bike might provide for us. The other thing that we recently did was we went on our first trip after 2 years, first trip since Doug's stroke. We went with Doug's family out to California for Thanksgiving, and proved to ourselves that we can do that. We can manage in an environment that's not our home, and we can make modifications to get up on that high bed that that was hard to perch on, and we can manage walking to a restaurant and ordering, and so it was a great time that we had.
And Shirley, the trip that you just took, correct me if I'm wrong, that was literally the 2-year anniversary of Doug's stroke that you took the trip.
That's right. Yes.
So what a wonderful victory for both of you, right? After 2 years of hard work that you've both done, to be able to take that trip. I mean, I'm just thrilled for you. Would it be okay if we opened up for some questions? See if anyone has any questions?
Yes.
All right, everybody, now's your chance. If you have any, put them in the Q&A box or raise your hand, and I will gladly open up your mic so you can ask them live. You're being bashful. I don't see any. So Michael says, amazing, exclamation mark. What was the name of the mountain that you climbed in Colorado?
Mount Shadow. Mount Shabano.
And it's a 14er.
Yes.
Another question from Susan. She asks, what has been the most difficult part of your recovery process?
It's slowness. I get discouraged. But yeah, it's Lomas.
It's a long, slow process, and that's where this
Yes,
issue of insurance, it just becomes so maddening. Is you need a long-term course of rehab because it's such a slow process, and insurance for most people cuts them off way too early in the journey.
yeah, yes.
Um, did someone have their hand up and I thought I saw it briefly and then I turned my head away and I don't see it anymore. If you'd like to ask a live question, put that hand back up. I'll definitely call on you. I don't see it. Shirley and Doug, we're so happy that you were able to take that trip to celebrate your 2-year anniversary.
Yeah,
We're so grateful that you joined us
Yeah.
tonight to tell your story. For those of our audience that may have seen it, Doug and Shirley were also interviewed by one of the Kansas City TV stations, KCTV5, did an interview with them before they left for their trip to California. So their story has been getting a lot of attention because it's such a meaningful story. And Doug, your journey continues, not unlike your spinal cord injury, which took a while to recover from. Your stroke is taking a while too, but we know you're a fighter and you're going to keep going.
yes. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us. We're really happy to have had you tell your story tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to turn to our last one, and our last one is another one of these stories that some of our longtime friends may be familiar with or may remember. Gentleman named Ed is going to talk with us tonight. I'm going to kind of set up his story. So Ed goes back to 2013. Ed is a coach. He coaches high school and college athletics. And suddenly this strong athletics coach has 2 strokes back in 2013, paralyzed the left side of his body. And that's Ed in the hospital. Here's Ed in his rehab process while he was inpatient at the hospital. And like Doug, Ed had a stroke and it's a long, slow process. Ed needed a lot of rehab. And Ed was one of Falling Forward's very first recipients. So why am I bringing up this old story from 2013? Well, it's a remarkable story because here's Ed 1 year later, after his inpatient rehab, 1 year later, here he is dancing with his daughter at her sweet 16. So that's, remarkable, right? Man who had a stroke and paralyzed on one side of his body, a year later dancing with his daughter. But his story went on and he went back to work. He went back to coaching. He was named head coach of this basketball team in Kansas City called the Tornadoes, and they had this phenomenal record. And Ed's story keeps going and going. And that's why I've invited Ed to join us and talk tonight, because I want everybody to get a sense of Ed's life keeps getting better because he got that rehab. So Ed, if you would, go ahead and unmute yourself and let's get your video going and say hello to everybody and tell everybody what you've been doing the past couple years. There he is.
Okay.
Hello,
Can you
Ed.
see me? You see me?
Yeah. Hi, Ed.
Okay. Everybody see me? Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. And first of all, I wanted to say how proud I am of Doug and then Shirley. I mean, they're remarkable people. A lot of people don't know that Doug, when I first got out of the hospital, when I was at LMH for four long months, um, Doug was my physical therapist at home. He would come to my house and he helped me. So he has helped me in this journey that I have taken. So I just want to know I'm very proud of him. I've seen him, his progress. I'm at LMH when he's at LMH, and I just watch him, and he is my hero. And I keep, I encourage him because he's going to make it, and he's come a long way since he's had that stroke. So I'm very proud of him. So keep up the good work. And Shirley, you're remarkable because I know it's hard being a caretaker and kind of because you're right there with him on this journey, and you may not be doing all the exercises and stuff, but you're there doing it with him. So I tip my hat off to both of you. But it has been a phenomenal year for me as far as professionally. Um, as you told everybody, like, it's been 8 years since in September, it was 8 years since my stroke in 2013. And back then, when I did have stroke, I never thought, all I wanted to do was get back to the bench to coach. And during that time, so I really worked really hard. And then Falling Forward stepped in, and it kept my dream alive. And through rehab, and a lot of people don't know, I still rehab. I go like twice a week to PT, OT. So I still rehab, and even it's not as I do a lot just like I did back then, and in between my little uh, seasons, during my seasons, I come, I'll leave for when I got to go coach or what I'm doing, and then come back and do more rehab. So I'm in a little time now for the next few months here rehab at my stomping ground at LMH. So it never stops. But I just want to like tell everybody what I've been doing the last um, since 2013. Sam has told you, I went back to coaching high school volleyball after I want to say 2015, 14. It was a year or so later, got back to the bench and kind of just went back to the old high school where I used to coach at and kind of helped out. And I started doing volleyball, um, where I was doing before I had the stroke, and actually had a really good team then, got coach of the year. And then I would have never thought of this when I was in the hospital when I had a stroke. I became a professional basketball coach. I had been in the pros as an assistant a few years before my stroke, but to be a head coach, I had never even dreamed of that. And I started with the Kansas City Tornadoes, and as he showed you, I had a really good team there. Uh, we were the best team that year, 25-4 record, and we were 12-0 at home, which is still, I want to say, it's still a record in the basketball league. So the league that I'm coaching in is the third level to the NBA. It's a development league, but it's the third level to the NBA. So my guys leave that league to the G League, which is right under the NBA, and then to the NBA. I'm the only coach in my league that have had two guys get called up to the NBA, and one is a former Kansas Jayhawk, Kevin Young, and then I had an Oklahoma State kid this past year that got caught up to the Oklahoma Thunder. But in the last 5 years with the league, in the basketball league, I was with Kansas City, then I went to Florida for a little bit to coach, and then I got a job in Enid, Oklahoma. Well, COVID hit when I was in Florida, but I got to travel and got to stay down there for a little bit and work down there. So I get this call. I go to Enid, Oklahoma, and a new team starting there in the same league. So this year, we actually won the national championship. We finished with a 30-3 record, the best in the TBL history. And then also we broke a record. We started out. We were 9-0 to start off the season. The best in the TBL. We broke the old TBL record, which was 8-0. And the team I beat and the coach I beat was myself. I had an 8-0 record with Kansas City, so I beat that record. So as the season went on, we ended up winning the national championship with 30-3. We finished 22-2 in the regular season, and we lost one playoff game, and we ended up winning the thing. And I ended up being coach of the year. And then I found out when they named me coach of the year, that I found out that I was the all-time winningest coach in the TBL in this league. And that was in the last, my first year I was assistant in Kansas City. So that's in the last 4 years. And the league has been inception for 5 years. So I became the all-time winners coach, which I was like, wow. But I was telling Sam earlier, during the championship run, I would be walking down the sideline sometimes, and I could not believe that I was doing what I was doing. And especially when we were winning the championship, the final game, and when the time was ticking down, and I was looking up at the clock, like we were gonna win this, and I could not, and it just hit me like I couldn't believe that. I thought 8 years ago, when I was in a wheelchair, couldn't even walk, I thought like I would never in my wildest dreams think I was going to be a championship coach coaching professional basketball when I was in that hospital. And but because of me rehabbing, it happened, and it has helped me to use it as a platform, even with my players, because when they see me and they hear and they see my story, because now it's like on YouTube and everything, and they see it, they have no excuse, and they just see that how I work as hard as they do, and so it has been a blessing, falling forward has. But also, it don't stop there. I did so well that the other doors started opening up, and I got a call from Merida, Mexico, in the Yucatan. Merida, Mexico is like 3 hours north of Cancun. And I got a job coaching basketball as a head coach there for a couple of months. And I went down there for a couple of months, 2.5 months to coach in the Mexican Professional Basketball League there. And I remember being on the airplane thinking like, wow, I cannot believe I am going to Mexico. And like, and because I celebrated, the stroke was in September of 2013. And I had just got to Mexico. I was in Mexico when the eighth year anniversary of the stroke. And I just thought to myself, like, this is unbelievable that I'm in another country, flying to another country to coach basketball when 8 years ago, I didn't even know if I was going to be alive, let alone coaching basketball, period, or coaching anything, and here I am. I'm the top coach one of the top coaches in the country and one of the top coaches in the world now. And who had ever thought back then.
So Ed, I hope this doesn't oversimplify it, but I would say your life just keeps getting better.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It
And it's like,
just keeps getting better.
yeah, because I never could have,
It-
even imagined all this.
and for the audience, this is what I wanted you to hear, right? Is the results of the initial results of the rehab and him dancing with his daughter was remarkable, right? But it just keeps getting better. But all the things he's accomplished, all the coaching accolades, etc., wouldn't have happened if he hadn't recovered, right? If he was still unable to walk, still sitting in a wheelchair. So, this is why rehab is so critical. And Ed's story is remarkable on many levels, but how it just keeps getting better and better year after year shows the investment, right? The investment that our donors made in 2013 and the investment of time that Ed made back in 2013. He was working his rear end off like Doug is now, right? Through all those therapy sessions. But that investment pays huge dividends. And if somebody's cut off and they can't attend rehab, they're told they're done, it stops. The recovery stops. And in many ways, their life kind of goes on hold. And Ed is the opposite of that. And he shows, right, that investment pays off. So, Ed, we're thrilled for you.
Thank you.
Next year, I expect there's going to be even something more. Right?
Well, I want to say one thing, Sam. Just to tell everybody know that all that rehab I did, and because of falling forward, foundation stepping in and assisting me and helping me is the reason why I'm being successful, and the reason why I got that championship this year, because it was all that rehab, that continuous rehab, and getting better and better. And as you said, like I would have never gotten that, because I wasn't even out of the wheelchair when my insurance stopped. So falling forward, coming in and helping me continue my rehab, helped me get to this point where I'm at now.
Bravo. Thank you, Ed. Anybody, any questions for Ed? We'll do the same thing. We'll open it up. If anybody wants to raise their hand, raise your hands. I'm going to check the Q&A real quick. If there's any, I don't see any questions in the Q&A box, but if anybody has one, type one in. I realize we're running long and I apologize for that. Part of it was my technical problems earlier, so I apologize. Ed, thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you.
You're
Thank you,
amazing.
everybody.
You're amazing.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
All right, I'm going to move my closing slides here. This is probably the most important one, right? You've heard 4 great stories. You help make these possible. If you have a glass, grab it, raise it, take a good drink out of it. Mine's got some red wine in it, as you can see. But truly, tonight is about celebrating, and all of you who've helped make this possible, please join in celebrating these lives that you've helped change. So in my upfront slides, I told you, last year we increased our grants to the rehab centers. Your support made it possible for us to increase our grants to the rehab centers. And that meant we helped more people than ever before. So that was last year, and we're super proud of it, right? Well, what do we think for this year? Well, the year ahead, we want to raise the bar even higher, right? We've seen such success this year. We want to raise the bar even higher. Obviously, that takes your support to make that happen. So this is the fundraising pitch, and this is all it's going to be tonight. We're not about heavy pressure, but literally, if you have the ability and you believe in what you've seen tonight, help us and make an investment in someone else's ability. And as for those of you who are new, you can tell by now, the word ability is our favorite word. crossing out the DIS, right? Get rid of that disability and turn it into ability. So how you can help. Make a new or renewed donation. And for those of you who don't know, we do have a monthly giving option. Some of you on the call are already signed up for the monthly giving. Some people love it, right? Spreads out the donation throughout the year. They don't have to think about it. It's automatic. So consider the monthly giving thing. Another way you can help us is suggest a contact. All of you on the call tonight know a lot of people, and you may know somebody that you think this would be really of interest to. We'd love it if you'd suggest a contact or introduce a friend to Falling Forward. And if you're on social media, you can help us spread the word. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. And if you're on those platforms, we hope you'll follow us and share our posts and help us spread the word about the work we're doing. We're super glad you joined us tonight. We appreciate that you've hung with us a little extra long. This is the wrap up, right? We can't thank you enough for all of your support. You make it possible to do what we do. You make it possible for people like Janelle and Jackson and Doug and Ed to recover and their lives go forward. So thank you all so very, very much. We're thrilled you joined us tonight. We're going to say goodnight and God bless everybody.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.